Salam sejahtera, anda sedang menonton Agenda Awani bersama saya, Cherish Lau. Saya berada di The Hub, Singapura dan untuk perbincangan hari ini, izinkan saya meneruskan perbincangan dalam bahasa English. For those that are not familiar with The Hub, Singapore, The Hub is a co-working space where people that shares common ideas, where they come together to create sustainable impact in life. And with me today is Jeffrey Paine. He's the co-founding partner for Golden Gate Ventures. He also founded Battle Ventures. He's also the director of Founder Institute Singapore. And just recently, Jeffrey was also awarded director with the greatest ecosystem impact by the Founders Institute Director Awards 2012. So thank you, Jeff, for joining us today on the show. So just now, I already gave a little bit of brief about you, but I don't think that whatever that I've given out just now to the audiences is good enough to give you justice. So Jeffrey, you have contributed so much in this space, like in startups and venture capital. What is your story basically? How did you first start it?
I was born and raised in Singapore, but then I went to school in Los Angeles, California. And I actually started out in a film school, but then I switched to business school studying information systems. So that's where my journey for computers and software began. And after that, I worked in a consulting firm, mainly in IT, and I service clients the entire, I would say most of our clients are in the Bay Area. So I was in Mountain View and San Francisco quite a bit for about 2 years. So that's where I was, a little bit more immersed in the industry. I met a lot of engineers. I met a lot of founders of startup companies.
So since when do you get involved so much in tech startups and venture funding?
My first job was in the consulting space, and we serve a lot of clients, especially in the technology industry, up north in Northern California and the Bay Area. So I was mostly in San Francisco and Mountain View for a while, for about 2 years. So in that time, I meet a lot of engineers, I meet a lot of founders of startups, and I'm also exposed to the people who fund them, so all the venture capitalists that are in the industry. So that's where I was more or less immersed in the ecosystem there. But I think right after that, it was typically a choice between joining a startup or doing something else involving in the ecosystem. So what happened after that was I was recruited back to Asia to run a venture fund. So I went to the financing side, not the startup side. So that's how my journey started.
Well, Singapore does not lack of homegrown entrepreneurs and also international founders starting company here. And you have government support, and at the same time, we have private industries coming in as well, like Singtel, Innovate. So in essence, Singapore is like a really vibrant startup scene right now. But how do you personally define the community, the people factor in Singapore?
You get, I would say it's half of them are foreigners. They are not locals per se, and the other half are local. So you can kind of see that diversity. And I think in the last 2 years, the economy in Asia is relatively stable. People are saving a little bit more money, or they're making a little bit more money in the last few years. So they have a little bit of runway to start off if they want to come out and be their own boss, or want to come out and solve a problem that they've always wanted to solve. And obviously, the ecosystem has changed a lot, so that helps in pushing people to do what they have always dreamt of doing.
But if we look at some of the countries like Korea, Japan, or China, how is Singapore stand out between all these countries? What is the factor that makes Singapore so different? What is the striking difference between all these countries?
Yes, there's two main differences. I think in general, the two main differences are legal and regulatory. Starting companies are not easy in those countries. and if you fail, the ramifications to your personal assets is another thing. So it's highly risky if you fail, and that's just the legal and regulatory part. The other part is culturally, taking risk and failing is extremely, something that these cultures take to heart. So, pride is huge there. If you fail, it's a shame to yourself and your family. That's a very different thing than Singapore is. So I think, in general, those countries tend to, people start companies slightly later in their lives, and they are, a bit more risk averse. So they tend to start consulting companies, things that make money from day one. They tend not to think so big, which in Asia is pretty general, but those countries tend to be slightly more.
Well, would you say that the companies in this region, they do not think global enough? So is it also at the same time not being able to think global enough is like a common pitfalls among all these Southeast Asia startups?
Yes, most startups' problems in Southeast Asia is they think small, but there's always reasons for that. Sometimes they have not gotten there yet. Sometimes it's their comfort zone, so they tend to think small because they are comfortable thinking small, comfortable executing small. Now, it's not necessarily wrong, because a lot of people are thinking, oh, we have to hit home runs, we have to be billion-dollar companies. The reality is it's extremely hard to do. It's really, really, really hard to do that, and it's very daunting. So if you have a big idea, it's very difficult to figure out how to get there, right? Without the number of employees, without the number of the amount of money in your bank, without time, without 5, 7, 8 years to get there, it's very, very daunting to get there. So most people tend to start small, and if they stay small, then they are not they're not fundable on our standards, right? But it's fine. It is a decent business. They feed their family, they feed their employees. It's perfectly okay. So what I want try to tell you is, think big, but execute small. Because if you don't execute small, you cannot move your business
one step after another.
Yeah, to even think of becoming big or position to be big, right? Because most companies, I would say majority of companies, don't live more than 3 years, right? So you need to have incremental movements. You need to survive every year. You need to, you need to get to the next stage before you even have a chance to think big. But you do need to know where you want to go, right? Because I would say 90% of companies, if you talk to most companies in Singapore or anywhere else, they will not get funded, right? So what? If you don't get funded, are you going to stop? No, right? You're going to keep going, right? Now, you may not think that big, but you think micro. You think, I got to get this client, I got to get step by step, right? If I can't raise money, I'll borrow from a bank, I'll raise it from my suppliers, I'll get it somewhere, somehow. If my product doesn't sell, I do consulting to feed, and then I'll keep selling, right? You do whatever it takes to get there. So that's pretty much it.
And on that note, we are going on to our first commercial break. And after the break, we're going to look at startup advice. There's one question that I would like to ask Jeffrey. That is, a lot of people have been going into startup scene because they thought that startup is easy to make money, but whether or not they got it right. So we'll talk to Jeffrey after the break.